Okay, bye.
All
Good
right.
luck. Have fun.
Bye, Barb.
I'll be right back for our next.
All of a sudden, Jane got camera shy. Barb, come back on. We need to balance this out a little bit.
No, we're good. All right. We got people coming in here.
Oh, nice little group.
Wait for Jane to get back, I guess.
Do you have any warm-up jokes or anything that we can tell people while we're waiting for Jane?
You're putting me on the spot here.
Sorry.
Okay.
I wanted this. This is gonna pair so perfectly with this.
But you're getting a glass of water.
I already have that. I was like,
It's Friday, man. So that's a Friday beer.
I'm sorry. I'm like, this whiskey's gonna taste so good with this beer.
Is that a beer or a seltzer water, Jane?
It's a beer. It's a new wit beer out of Rhinegeist in Cincinnati.
Nice. Yeah, they make good beer.
Like, yeah. And so for your all's like spring has a fat in it. It's gonna go well with this, I think.
All right. So welcome everyone who's tuned in with us today. Thanks for joining us. My name's Pat Brophy. I'm the Director of Spirit Sales at Binny's. I've got Brett Pontani with me, who's our longtime specialty spirits buyer. And we are joined today by Denny Potter and Jane Bowie from Maker's Mark. And we're going to talk the private select program, Maker's Mark in general. If you got any Maker's Mark questions, just let us know. Please use the Q&A function at the bottom control bar of your Zoom. That way it pops up with an alert, and we'll be able to get your question answered, hopefully. So, Brett, you want to start us off here?
Sure. So Maker's Mark Private Select. It's funny, we were lucky to get to start this program early on with Jane when it was developed, and having been around in the liquor business for a long time, one of the questions that we always got, especially when Maker's was a smaller brand by volume, but just as crafty as it is now, a lot of requests. Well, I got a gold label Maker's Mark, I got this type of Maker's Mark, and that Maker's Mark is any different. I'm like, well, you know, Maker's Mark's one whiskey. The Samuels family for years, they make one whiskey extremely well. Eventually, they decided to make a whiskey that was different from the Maker's Mark that they typically made. And I think that's right around the time where Jane came on the scene. I'm assuming, Jane, can you take it from here?
Actually, Maker's 40, if you're talking about Maker's 46 is celebrating 10 years next month, and one Dennis P. Potter there online at his first tour of duty at Maker's Mark I was working for the brand, but not at the distillery at the time. So Denny can speak more to kind of the creation of 46. And that was really the catalyst that has, I guess, got us bit with the flavor bug on let's go figure out where more flavor lives in agriculture. So Denny, over to you.
Thank you, Jane. Appreciate it.
The nicest I'm going to be to you tonight.
Smooth. We're professionals here, so this is all going really well.
Yeah. Jane and I work a lot together. So, yeah, I mean, so yeah, I was lucky enough in my first stint. There's a whole story about what happened in between. Yeah, I'm not Jane. But yeah, so, you know, for the longest time when I came on board at Makers, it was all about classic makers, right? I mean, you've heard us say it, probably a lot of people say it, that, you know, my mandate when I came on board at Maker's Mark is, you know, don't F it up. And I don't know what kind of crowd we have on here right now. Typically, I don't say F, I say something a little more colorful. And that was the mandate forever. And so, you know, there's a lot of pressure in that. And the fact that at the time, you know, we've been making that juice for 50 something years. And all of a sudden, Bill Jr. is, I want to do something different. I want to, you know, really create something that fits my palate, my taste vision. And he came to myself and Kevin Smith. Kevin was master distiller and I was assistant master distiller. And he said, I want to create a Maker's on steroids. And he gave us all these guardrails. He's like, I don't want to bastardize what my parents did. And if you come back and tell me you want to change, you know, all these things, specifically mash bill, age, everything else, he goes, I'm going to fire you. And so we're like, oh, okay, yeah, well, this gives us a lot to work with.
And no one's ever been fired by Bill Samuels, so that would have been really embarrassing.
And what is Bill?
Don't make it too different, or I'm going to fire you.
Well,
what did Bill Senior have to say during all these discussions? Was he involved in these discussions?
Oh no. So Bill, yeah. Well, I mean, he might have been talking to Bill Jr., but he had passed well before these discussions. So, yeah, I mean, it was, you know, first we were like, oh my God. I mean, he wants to do something different. And then we were like, all right, makers on steroids, you know, how are we going to do this? And, you know, we're lucky enough. One of the great things about our industry and our business, and specifically Maker's Mark, is it's very generational. So the people you work with, your suppliers, your customers are generational. And, you know, we've been working with independent Stave and the Boswell family for a very long time. And it just so happened that Brad Boswell had been coming to the plant to talk about, you know, the next year's barrel purchases. And we told him, like, you're not going to believe this, but, you know, Bill Jr. came in and said he wants to do something a little bit different. He wants to create a Makers on steroids. And, you know, Kevin and I were explaining it to Brad. Brad started laughing, and we're like, we don't know what to do with this. Like, we have no idea how to do this. And we were just started to ask him some ancillary questions about, you know, just barrel techniques, this and that. And he's like, obviously you guys don't pay attention to anything we do outside of the whiskey industry. And that's when he started talking to us about what they were doing on the wine side with flavor staves, cubes, other things. And we're like, oh, holy shit, what is this? And he's like, yeah, he goes, I'll send our wood chemist down next week. And I look at Kevin, I'm like, what the, it's a wood chemist. So this guy comes down and, you know, he brings all these different variations of things that they were doing on the wine side. And long story short, we ended up, you know, kind of creating the stave process and going through multiple variations of, you know, these, you know, not just the type of staves, but also how you age them. You know, I mean, it was a good at least 2 years to where we finally came up with a profile that met Bill Jr.'s vision, which was Makers on steroids. And it happened to be Stave Profile 46, which is how 46 got its name. So we launched Makers 46 in 2010. And as Jane said, you know, celebrating 10 years with Makers 46. And that, you know, I think a lot of the learnings from that led into what Jane created with the Private Select program, and, you know, just taking it to a whole nother level. And I was not involved in any of that. But when I came back to see, you know, everything that they had done, and but yeah, I think 46 kind of led into how we ended up with this Private Select program and how it's so uniquely different than what anybody else does when it comes to these, you know, these barrel purchases.
Well, and it's a good, and again, going back to being on the retail side of the business for a long, long time, and having gotten down there again when Makers was smaller and watching it grow into this, you know, we're known amongst other things for our single barrel program. So we were always pushing for variants
remember
a single barrel program and asking, it's like, come on, please, can't we have cast strength? Can't we do single barrels? And again, and the everybody really stuck to, it's like, no, Makers is Makers. We make it this way. We make it the best we can possibly make it. And this is the way, and this is the way it's going to be. So 46 being the variant, which was interesting, and probably the one thing that you could change, that could change it, but not get too far off the ranch.
Yeah, I mean, that 46, for any audience members that might, for some reason, have not tasted it in the past 10 years, is one of the sneaky great bourbons that's on the shelf pretty much all the time now, thanks in part to the cave that there's a picture of behind me, right? So you guys ran into some issues on production of 46 initially because 46 was a French oak stave, and you found that it was getting a little too extracted and woody when it was aged in hotter months, right? That's correct. Yep. And then so it was, first of all, it was only then made for a few months in the cold weather. So we'd run out of it quickly once we actually got it. And so you did the reasonable thing and just built a damn cave into the hill behind the distillery, right?
Yeah, blew the hell out of a bunch of limestone.
Dynamite at a distillery. What could go wrong?
Yeah. Where the employees parked. And that was the employee parking lot too, which was crazy.
They all got to walk 200 extra yards or something to get in the work now. I'm sure they don't hold that against you at all.
Well, you used to come through because the first time I would have gone in there, the entrance isn't where it is now. You would have come in right, and what I guess served as kind of the gift shop is now a lot more elaborate in the restaurant and everything.
Yeah.
Was a tiny little outbuilding where you kind of met people, but you had to walk up to the old, what is it, the exciseman's building? Would have been where we would have met, or one of the Samuel's old houses.
You talking like where the tour started?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's where the restaurant is. I mean, that for the longest time was where, well, for the longest time, tour started, stopped, and gift shop was right there.
It was a one-stop shop.
Yeah. Then we went through some iterations where we have 2 warehouses that are right in the center of campus. So as we figured out we needed to build a bigger gift shop, well, let's just pretty much deconstruct half a warehouse and put a gift shop in that. So then we started at that building and then ended in the gift shop. And then now it's completely different. That's a restaurant. And then you start up at the top of the hill and then finish down at the gift shop. So, I mean, we've seen, and then, yeah. And so the visitors used to park right there. And now that's, the cellar for Makers 46 and Private Select. And, we're already.
Yeah, so you got this beautiful cellar, and it keeps things kind of cool and consistent versus a standard rick house. So that kind of opened the door for this experimentation with the various other wood staves, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would say Brett is 50% responsible. He's got his nagging skills.
Give Brett too much credit here.
He could medal in nagging, I think, at the Olympics.
Well, I'm getting credited for having a big mouth, which is also not all that unusual.
You Binny shoppers should thank him because he goes to bat hard. I mean, we probably a decade of people calling and saying, we want a single barrel of Makers. And it wasn't that, it was more, we just felt like it would have been disingenuous. We work really hard to make all of our whiskey taste the same, through rotation, through bottling to taste, all these things. And so for the better part of a decade, when the Bretts of the world would call, we would say, oh, good to hear from you. No, not happening. Good chat.
True.
And we kind of stopped and thought, we've been around for 60 years because of people like you guys, right? You're the reason the lights are still on in Loretto. You're the reason that we can do all these fun projects and expand because people have loved Makers. And we felt like we owed it to you all to be a little more thoughtful. So we thought, okay, we can't do a single barrel the way everyone else does it because A, boring as fuck. B, it's been done. Like, what can we do that makes sense for us? And so where we netted out was with 46, the whole idea was not reinventing the wheel. The whole idea was he wanted to create an expression of Makers for his palate. We thought, wouldn't that be fun if Pat got to create an expression of Makers for his palate and Brett got to do the same for him, or you got to engage customers and they, what they love. Because Denny and I laugh. We taste whiskey, usually every day together. Now it's virtually a lot. But our palates are totally opposite. So if we were trying to build a barrel together, we would do mine because I would just wear him down. But, we would never.
No, be honest. You beat the shit out of me.
We would never come to an agreement together.
You mean there's competition on the metal podium for nagging?
I believe that might have been, yes, there might be some argument about that.
There's a reason Brett and I've always gotten along. So that was the idea, was what if we actually, bring our best partners in, and Binny's, you were in those first 20 barrel, like you were in our pilot season where we had no idea what we were doing. And you guys were patient with us and we learned a lot that first year of, here's what we're thinking. And you guys came in and you were distillers for a day and you learned where flavor came from and you created a vision for your own Makers that we produced and laid down on site for you. So it really was driven by the single barrel craze and us realizing we couldn't do it like everyone else because we make one thing to a certain taste profile. So
Well, that's a good summary of the program. So in a nutshell, we've got 5 different staves we can work with, right? And of those 5, we can make some combination of 10 staves that get inserted into a barrel, which is kind of what's going on in the picture in Brett's background here. And so this one, we've got 2 P2, which is baked American pure. We've got 2 Cuvée, which are French oak, 2 Mocha, which are French oak, and 2 Spice, which are also French, correct?
4 French Cuvée.
4 French Cuvée, sorry. But we're pretty French oak heavy on this.
Yeah.
And
which we posted, by the way. What we're learning really
2020.
quickly is Pat, the questions. Denny's obviously done this before because he's, without even
Denny's all over
breaking
the
away, is like is answering all the questions on the chat. So that's
that was my bad.
No, it's perfect. Trust me, it makes it easier. The other day, Pat let me run one of these things briefly, and it was a disaster. So it's better to have people that are a little bit better at handling this. So one of the questions that was up, which Denny answered, but Jane, what are you drinking right now?
I am drinking, in my left hand, I am drinking the Binny's Spring Release. In my right hand, I am drinking your 5th expression you created, I think a couple of years ago. That it's interesting. It's bright. It's actually more summer to me, where this is more spring. The spring's more spring.
Mission accomplished.
But they're both delicious, just really different.
So that was our overall attempt this year. So normally when we come down, we'll do like 4 of these things, do these 4 times a year, do 4 different barrels. We have all these different expressions, a different spirits manager or somebody else from our office is going to create their own flavor profile. And what we want to do this year was streamline it a bit and do a seasonal flavor profile that would hopefully match each of these upcoming seasons. So obviously we started with spring, and we were going for something that had a fair bit of fruit, but a little lighter in character, some floral notes to it, not too heavy on the spice, which we'll probably obviously save for fall or winter or something. So I'm curious if anybody's tasting along at home, let us know what you think and if we nailed this one or not. I think we did a pretty good job with this. It's always hard to tell when you're choosing these staves and then they go back into the barrel for additional aging. Yeah. But, Makers isn't exactly, the small distillery it once was. And you guys have a lot of science and technology behind maintaining these profiles and these flavors, right?
We do. I think what's so great is it really is about running the science and the sensory in parallel. And at the end of the day, though, everything begins and ends with the nose and the palate. But we actually run analytics on our HPLC on every single barrel. And so we measure different wood compounds to parts per million. And we're studying a lot to understand what these staves are going to provide. But it's still an agricultural product, right? Every oak tree is going to be slightly unique. So it means that there's still nuances to every barrel, but we feel pretty confident in being able to predict the profile you want is going to be delivered. It's just going to have some, different nuances, just like every bottle of whiskey you're going to have, which is fun.
I mean, that's what oak chemists are for, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not a bad gig if you can get it.
Yeah. I want to go back to school so I can make up my own degree.
Exactly.
I just don't have 6 years to get it done.
So Pat kind of touched on a lot of what we did earlier when we were designing these things. So what we're trying to lay out for the rest of the year was, originally we just sort of did what we wanted to do and had different flavor profiles. And first we tried to have one that was kind of like Makers, but a little bit different. And then we wanted to do one that was far off the ranch. And we've had the opportunity to actually get together with some of our Whiskey Hotline and study group participants. So different spirits managers we have throughout the chain and consultants, and allow them to do some creation. So this year, to be a little bit more organized, we met with Jane in December and decided we were going to run a seasonal program where we were going to do create a batch we felt kind of reflected spring in our mind. And then create a batch that reflected summer, which is, I believe, aging right now. Mm-hmm. We're going to have to do one that reflects fall, and we're doing one that reflects winter.
Love that.
Before everybody had to stay at home, we had an idea, and we would still pursue it if we can, to have some consumer participation. So keep that in the back of your mind, everybody out there, to have some consumer participation to create the winter style. And then we've got a couple of other surprises. Can we talk about what's coming in the summer and the fall, Jane?
Sure.
We're trying to beg to have them get us examples of every single stave in isolation. And that is a lead up to some consumer participation in creating these batches, and be able to make available for people to buy each of the separate staves in isolation. The first time that was done was Maker's 46. The second time, Maker's 46 cast strength, the Samuels. The second time that was done was actually our C6, which is the newest stave that is an experimental stave that's come in. And so we're going to give everybody an opportunity here in the fall to try each of the different staves in isolation. And hopefully that'll be a buildup to get some folks in to come and help us create these, because we're having a lot of fun, and it's something I think we would like to share. And I'm sure, Jane and Denny would like to share with everybody too. So we're getting some good comments. So for those of you out there that are drinking the spring or tasting the spring now, did we do a decent job of getting a spring-like feel? Is anybody else out there tasting any of the other, what's Johnny from Hermosa tasting? I've seen we've gotten a couple of comments from him.
You're going to get a lot of comments from Johnny of Hermosa.
I think that Jane and Denny know Johnny from Hermosa.
Oh, if only we didn't. I'm just kidding.
Got a question in our question and answer here, and it says, it looks like you all are drinking from different types of glasses. How important is the glass when sampling whiskey? I would say fairly important. You generally want something with a smaller surface area that's going to funnel the aroma more up into your nose. I'm not doing that right now. I did not go downstairs into my kitchen and get a proper glass, and I have a thing of plastic cups on my desk. And so I have a small plastic tumbler with a little sample of this whiskey in it. What do you have, Denny?
So yeah, I mean, it is important. Like if you go into our innovation lab or our quality control lab, we're going to have very specific glassware that, when we're really trying to drill down into the specifics of what we're tasting, what we're smelling. What I'm drinking out of, I'm sitting at my desk right now. So this is actually a hand-blown glass we're giving out to all the employees this year. So a guy down in New Orleans, which I'll give him a little bit of a shout out, made these glasses. This is a glassblowerbin.com. Made these glasses, and we're giving them to all the employees this year on their anniversary dates. And then he's got a little bit of a maker's mark stamped on the bottom. So I just happened to have this sample sitting on my desk along with your bottle. And it was just very convenient. I'm a little bit lazy today, so it was easy to pop that bottle in.
And you guys are going to use different, I think different design, because what has seemed to be popular over the last 10 years, actually it's perfect timing because I believe it's their 10th anniversary, is the Glencairn Blender's glass, which a lot of people use in labs. Also that Copita. Yes, exactly. And the Copita, I'm using something mine's a little bit more tuliped, but I'm using basically a Copita style glass, which has the same principle as the Glencairn in terms of the shape of the bowl, but it has the addition of a stem so I can hold on to it without warming up the liquid that's inside the glass. It's the whole purpose of the bottom base. But I think that a lot of people, again, there's a difference between what we use when we're doing assessments, and I'm sure what Jane and Denny use when they're in a laboratory type setting, and what I'm drinking out of at home. And quite frankly, I'm probably at home drinking out of something more along the lines of what Denny has, because it makes it a lot easier to drop a small ice cube into if I want to on top of something.
Yeah. Another question is from Amy, and it's, who has the final say for the Stave combo? For us, it's, kind of a panel decision, I guess, more than anything. So for this year, when we're doing one release per quarter, there's usually between 3 and 6 of us tasting these things and putting them together. And I think for the summer batch that's currently aging, we went through 7 different iterations before we really landed on one that we liked. So there's a lot of discussion with it. There's tasting and then tasting against another version and then retasting the first one. And we go back and forth. When, if it's a single barrel, in our Whiskey Hotline office, Brett, myself, and Joe all have slightly divergent palates in what we prefer. And so we do see that a lot with single barrel selections. And if we're only going to get one barrel of something, it does, it needs to come down to a vote and we need to be in agreement. So sometimes somebody has to lobby for their favorite barrel to the other two until we can be in agreement on what we feel is the best and the most worthy of the Binny's name on it. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah,
and
these are actually might even be a little bit tougher to do, just like Pat said, because the nice thing about when we were just kind of riffing and doing anything we wanted was you didn't have to agree on just one, and we were always afforded the option, at least initially, to do a couple at a time. Now we've been able to do more, that to everybody can sort of guide it in and be able to make an argument. I mean, the raw material we're starting with is fantastic. So, I mean, the nice thing about this program is it's not like we can really screw it up, because what we're starting with is pretty damn good. The seasonals have been a little bit tougher because we do have to have an agreement. But then again, too, it is, you have, as Pat said, we have 3 different people that are really doing a lot of this for Binny's between Joe and he and I. And but we also have some difference in palates, which means that eventually we can arrive and understand exactly what it is that we can do. And I think, it's based off, there was a great story about back in the day, that's how Macallan actually, which is famous for consistency, one of the things that Macallan did, and I think that I would guess that you guys do even with regular Maker's Mark product when you're putting together batches. Macallan was always known. Macallan, you did dump 100 barrels to make a batch of Macallan 12 or Macallan 18, and they had a 5-person tasting panel was the tradition. They had 5 people that tasted it, and they weren't just, it was the blender, it was the distiller, but it was also a couple of guys who had been around forever in the warehouse, person in the lab, and every single person had a veto to a batch, no matter, even if it was the warehouseman. They had a veto. What do you guys on a day-to-day basis when you're constructing just regular makers or cast strength? Or what's the process you go through for that product, which is known for consistency?
We have a few, actually. We have a few different panels. So we have that taste panel that is quality control. We actually have about 27, 28 people that pop in, and that is nosing and sampling anywhere from 30 to 60 samples a day. Everything white we nose, everything brown we nose and taste. And that is really about consistency, and the more people you can get, and it's people from different departments who touch the whiskey at different processes. So every single one of our bourbon specialists, which give tours, are on that panel because they taste every day. And then Denny and I spend a lot of time on different kinds of panels, really diving in more. But yeah, it is all about consistency and getting as many people nosing and tasting as you can is really important. So
on that note, DPK asked a question. I think they're trying to pick a fight here. Who has the better palate, Jane or Denny?
I'm sorry, you cut out there for a second.
Sorry, man.
I would be willing to bet that Jane's not going to head. She's going to answer that question. Jane?
Jane is phenomenal. I mean, no, she's really good. Like
I think
I'm pretty good. I think, Jane is obviously been a lot of time fine tuning, and
I think
that was not a concession, Jane. I'm just I'm giving you a softball. I'm tossing it.
No, I think we have different strengths and weaknesses, and then there's things, that's why you have a lot of people. Some things are it's like a muscle you practice, and then other things are just God-given, right? There are certain compounds that some people can smell the parts per trillion, and others would never know they were there. So that is why you want multiple people that eat and drink and have different just natural abilities. So I would say Denny is better at the sweet, like picking up sweet stuff. I'm better at kind of fruit and I think spice characteristics. So like I think how we decide is once we both agree on something, we know it's probably the right thing, because usually I would say 99.9% of the time we do not agree on the best whiskey. Is that fair?
Well, but I think that there's a difference too with what you're doing, because we're asking who has the better palate, but you have a number of different sorts of palate, and you guys are required to have different palates than a normal consumer, even we would have to have, because you're at the production level, which means a big piece, and you explained it very well, Jane, a big piece of your palate are flaws. And it's just like, can you smell a whiskey and say, oh man, somebody let some corn go through, that just somehow some corn got through, that might have had a little bit of mold or might have had too much moisture. So I mean, you're nosing and tasting for technical details. So that's one piece. And then the other piece, of course, is and that's the one I think where you get a lot of people involved in. What are people really going to like?
And I think, I'm sorry, go, Denny.
No, I mean, so yeah, you're right. I mean, so like on the distillate side, even when you're bringing people in, because we do the traditional mash bill we've been doing for 66 years, it's really is, you're looking for what shouldn't be there. You don't have to get, all consumed with what should be there. It's really what shouldn't be there. I think there's another talent, and this is definitely where Jane exceeds me, and should have probably said that under my breath. But there's a talent of describing what you're tasting, right? Like, I know what I like. I know I can explain it in basic terms and bring people along. But when you're trying to do, especially when you get into these wood finishing things, you're trying to be very descriptive about what you're tasting. That's just, maybe I'm just dumb and don't have a huge vocabulary, but Jane's very good about.
Or I've been making it up all these years. You'll never know.
Well, Jane gets paid by the adjective, so there's a difference there.
I get paid by the cuss word, but I'm, obviously, so trust me, I make a lot of money. But no, it's, I think there's a lot of different things, but if you're looking at distillate, it's really about what shouldn't be there. And then on the flip side of that.
But that's the perfect way, but that really truly defines the difference in the styles. And I like the way you said, you're looking for things that shouldn't be there.
Right.
And then there's tasting like that. And then there's tasting, then there's describing what is there.
So on that, sorry, I had to restart. Zoom does not like my rural internet. We had a couple questions in the Q&A that I can't see anymore because I had to restart Zoom. One of them was if we have any favorite stave combinations, I think. Do you guys see those?
Yeah, it's from Jay and Kieran Lee asked if we have any leanings towards favorite stave combos.
I like the combination of spice and the P2 a lot. Personally, I like spice. I think gives the whiskey a little more body, and I like using that. And baked American oak tends to bring out a lot of fruit, so I like using those on the ones I've created. The only one I really am not a huge fan of that I tend to steer away, that I've found myself steering away from, not on purpose, just after the fact, is I don't tend to use a lot of the mocha staves when I'm putting these things together.
Do you not like, do you not like it?
Denny just gave you a thumbs up, by the way.
Denny doesn't like it either. Maybe you and Denny are like palate soulmates.
Don't go for really wood forward stuff. And I think it's
too astringent.
It a lot of wood. And so I tend to steer away from it.
Well,
Bill Samuels doesn't like it either. You're in good company.
Well, we've also been able, that's the great thing about this program, is we've also been able to approach, because I'm kind of with Pat. Normally when we're doing these barrels, I always kind of start with a base and build on it. And that's sort of been the mentality I've used when I've been involved in other blending projects, especially on the Scotch side, because of the variant that you can get in Scotch. Is I'll take a good base. And for me, the base tends to be P2. Whereas I'll kind of use that as a marker, either P2 or 46. And this is sort of something that is kind of round, to me, versatile, round, and could be manipulated in other directions depending upon what else you add in. And then from there, add the ones that to me are much more forward in character, which are the French spice, the mocha, and the seared French.
That's a good point about the 46, though. That's something over the past, 6 years of doing this or whatever, 5 years, there's a 46 stave I don't think has ever made the whiskey worse. And like, even when I've got someone I think, oh, this is perfect, almost always you can take out one stave and just put 146 stave in there, and it almost always makes it a better whiskey, just deeper, rounder, fuller whiskey. I really like that 46 stave.
There's probably a reason why 46 won. I mean, in the first go round, there's probably a reason why 46 won, right?
I've probably tasted thousands of different wood finishes and staves and oak projects over the last 5 years. And I will tell you, I don't know that I've ever tasted anything as complete and complex and just all the things 46 can do. Like, we've just not found anything that's quite as special as that stave.
Yeah, it's the total package. And
it is.
Multiple times a year, we'll host a big blind bourbon tasting as part of our weekly training with our spirit staff from all over our chain of stores. And we do it 100% blind. And we might taste 30 bourbons blind over the course of multiple hours. And I don't think 46 has ever finished outside the top 3 or 5, like always, no matter what. And this is bourbons ranging from, $10 to $200, and 46 just always punches above almost everything else. And especially at, frankly, sometimes the ridiculous prices we run it at. You can get it for less than $30 sometimes. It's crazy.
It is. It's so flavorful, and it's got, that 94 proof gives it enough body and oomph, but because of the French oak and how it extracts, it actually drinks smoother than a lot of 80 proof bourbons when you actually approach that whiskey. But it's so rich and complex. I mean, I'm always amazed what we know now that Denny and Kevin got there as fast as they did on that process, because it was something that no one was really doing. John Glaser was doing it a little with Spice Tree, but like, you just didn't see anyone in whiskey doing anything like that 10 years ago.
I wish we could. We had no clue what we were doing. We had, we were trying small barrels, you name it. It was just, I think
the whiskeys from that project, and most of them taste like absolute shit.
Oh, they were terrible.
But you also had no preconceived notions. You were obviously willing to try stuff. You didn't think it's better to avoid the instinct that's like, well, I have to be right about this. Right?
Right.
You end up with a lot of disappointment.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's kind of funny, Brett. You had talked about cast strength earlier, and that was one of the, like, when Bill was laying down his guardrails for this Makers on Steroids, one of them was, if you come back with a cast strength, I will fire you. And of course, then it's like 4 years later, we come out with a cast strength, and I was like, yeah, that's Rob. That's Rob. Rob finally got his influence over his dad. But yeah, that whole project, I wish I knew. We knew that, we were kind of onto something, but the whole, that 2 years just to get there was, there were a lot of days we just felt stupid. We're like, what? Are we getting anywhere with this? And it's like a lot of experimentation. You just have no idea. And I feel like we kind of backed into and got lucky with, all of a sudden we're like, oh shit, man, we might be onto something here. This might be it. But
and it's a nice way that you can now you can have your cake and eat it too, because you can have a brand that's all about consistency, integrity, and then have a variant of the brand that is endless possibilities, depending on what you want to do. There was somebody, and this is one of the questions that's been out there, a couple of questions about the ambassador program. Yeah. And will makers bring back the ambassador barrel program? And can ambassador go to the distillery and see the Binny's barrels aging?
So our ambassador program is still alive and well. You do still get your name on a barrel. And I think they're constantly finding new and fun ways to engage our ambassadors. As far as seeing Binny, yeah, the cellar's part of the tour. So if you guys are making whiskey at our site, people can see it laid down resting, and
it's all right there. It's right on the floor.
Yeah, and we love getting out and seeing ambassadors. This has been the least I've traveled my entire career. So I can't wait till this is lifted and we get up to you guys and can do let your customers pick an expression for you. I think that would be fun. See how they do.
That would be fun. And we've got, capability, hopefully, that we can use again at some point. We have classrooms spread around our stores all over the area. So hopefully we can build some kind of blending program that we can get customer input for in this in the future.
And even if we can't, maybe we do it like this. I mean, it'd be fun to even see what people just sipping at home are loving about other picks you've done or makers, and it'd be fun. Let us know. We like excuses to drink on our computers. It's a good time.
Right.
So we have questions are pouring in here. Which line do you recommend to make, dare I say, as a cocktail? Don't be ashamed of using good whiskey in a cocktail. Better ingredients make better cocktails. What do you guys have a go-to maker's favorite if you're going to make a Manhattan or something at home?
Manhattans, I love 46. Personally, I think like the dark fruit and the caramel just lean so well on a Manhattan. Right now, it's starting to get warm in Kentucky, so it's like sour season. I love classic makers in a whiskey sour. But I was actually just thinking, you're all springtime. I have some lemons that are going to go bad, like a lemon syrup old fashioned with your springtime. Like cast strength old fashions are.
I bet that would be really good. I've been making a lot of gold rushes lately.
Oh,
it's really just a riff on a sour anyway.
Yeah.
And I bet this would be really outstanding. I'm probably going to use the rest of the small sample I have here to make one later tonight.
That would be delicious.
For sure. All right. What else we got?
Denny's theory is ice makes it a cocktail, right? You're like my dad. Ice makes it a cocktail. That's what my dad always.
I'm the world's worst bartender. So
I'm not good either. I always joke that my cocktail is a glass and a whiskey, classic 2-ingredient cocktail.
I mean, listen, I'm simple. I like it. I mean, trust me, I'll make an old fashioned and a Manhattan, and I love cast strength. I mean, cast strength is, it's about as pure as it gets. So, I'll drink cask anything, and I can interchange any one of, whether it's 46 classic, cask, a private select release. My favorite, and Jane kind of hit on this. I mean, I think one of the things that I miss about traveling, people always ask, what's your favorite cocktail? There's nothing better than walking into a key cocktail account and just saying, how do you like to serve makers? I mean, what is your take on an old fashioned? Or, that's my favorite. If somebody else is making it, I'll sure in the hell drink it. It may not be the same the other way around, but that's okay.
We've seen your cocktails.
Listen, I didn't force you to drink that. You chose to drink it.
No. That sounds like the old Book No cocktail, the pint glass full of ice and bourbon.
He would be the worst bartender. He pours like 4 ounces at a time. He's like, here's a pint of whiskey.
Yeah.
See, I'll stick with the fancy cocktail, the highball, spelled H-I. That's pretty easy to make. You can't really mess it up.
Right.
Makers fits well.
All right, we have 2 other questions here. Jeff V on Facebook asks, do all the panelists like wheaters, or are they more into ryes, or what's their favorite? Picking a favorite's pretty impossible. I will say when I like a wheated bourbon, I like it with a slightly lower wheat percentage, which I think makers is kind of in the wheelhouse with that. There's some wheaters out there that are, almost double the wheat as makers, and I think wheat, and too high. Personally, I find it to be a little flabby and light when you get a little too much of it. What do you guys think?
For me, there's a reason I've worked at makers for 13 years. I love wheated bourbons, and I like rye bourbons too. I grew up in Kentucky, but for me, I love the creaminess. I love the softness. You get spice, but it's more baking grandma spices versus savory spices, which I love. Makers to me, like early memories, it's Christmas in a glass. So like I love what wheated bourbon brings as far as the softness and the creaminess. But that's just me. I'm a Kentuckian though. I've never met a bourbon I didn't like, to be fair.
That's fair.
Yeah.
And there's some argument too that you make. There's some argument you make about wheat as well. That is there. What is you talk about what flavors it impart. I mean, I've always sort of been a proponent of the idea that in the case of wheat to me just kind of stays a good wheated bourbon means that the wheat stays the hell out of the way of the corn. And I think a lot of the character you get, I think a lot of what you end up getting from wheat is mouthfeel and texture and silkiness, and it allows the corn to shine a little bit more. Whereas the rye will have a rye as a small grain, or as the flavoring grain, will have more aggressive effects on the flavor. Whereas the wheat flavor it's more additive and allows the basis of the corn to come out and gives texture and gives feel, rather than having super aggressive identifiable flavors, which rye definitely does.
All right, we're gonna mark that answered. Somebody else here. I took a tour of makers several years ago, and during the tasting portion, they poured some makers that was aged a couple extra years to show that older isn't necessarily better. Is that still the thinking? It seems like a lot of people out there are looking for older wheated bourbon.
Jane, can I have this one, please?
Go.
Yeah, that was something we used to do. We used to, walk people through, basically kind of an evolution of makers from, the distillate to what it is at 2 year, what it is at fully mature, which for us is around 6 year. And then also, what it is, what we call over mature. And, one of the things that I tell everybody, and this is something that, just don't judge the quality of a bourbon by age or price. Mm-hmm. And if you're doing that, you're missing out on a lot of good stuff. Obviously makers, there's a lot of other things out there, but yes, I mean, we did, we had one, I think back then we would taste people on maybe like a 9 or 10-year-old. And for us, it's all about, I mean, what are you trying to do with this, right? So if we're trying to hold true to the vision we've had from day one, sweet, smooth, no bitterness, all the other things, then it doesn't mean that 9 or 10-year-old isn't good. It's just different. What I have found with those, specifically for ours, is the nose is fantastic. But there's not a balance between what you smell and what you taste. It's almost like you're getting two different types of products. But, it was a very interesting tasting that we used to do. We don't do that so much anymore, just because we'd much rather taste people on cask and 46 and, a private select variation. But that's my whole takeaway. And I've been trying to tell people this forever is, if you like it, you like it. Don't get hung up on age or price. I mean, if you do, it's, man alive, are you missing out and probably throwing some money away?
That is a fair answer to that question.
Jane?
We've got high praise for the Bill Samuels Jr. Select right now. That's just essentially cast strength 46, right?
Yes, and I will say 46 lends itself well to cast strength, I think.
Mm-hmm. All right. We've got one from we've got a plant question from Greg, who we all know. Beyond the private select program, what is interesting and exciting in wood finishing right now? Any different types of oak beyond American and French that have unique texturing maybe? And how far down the wood science rabbit hole are you planning to go in the coming years?
Now, Jane, like when you guys answer, you're supposed to say, Greg, I'm glad you asked.
This is going to take the rest of the time to answer, Greg.
Greg, I'm glad you asked this 7-part question as I'm 2 Binny's drinks in.
Hey, don't forget we were doing innovation tastings earlier today. So
I just got home we've been tasting all day. What was the question again?
I have no pants on.
How far down the rabbit hole in the wood finishing world are you guys planning on going here?
Yeah, so just to give you guys an insight into how it works, we don't come in and go, independent stave, we want French oak seasoned outside for 3 years, and then cooked at 175 degrees on an open flame with hickory nuts. Like, we don't say that. So basically, we are exploring flavor, and I think the whole thing is, as I said before, this is an agricultural ingredient with all this natural flavor, and it's amazing how seasoning outside and drying the wood and then cooking the wood can create all this flavor. So we go to them and we give very specific taste goals and standards we're looking for. And actually everything we taste is blind. So this year's wood finishing release that's coming in the fall, we just signed off on those staves last week. So I can't tell you the kind of wood or how it's cooked yet, because we do everything blind. Because believe it or not, you start to get biases. Oh, I like this oven, or oh, French oak has spices.
Absolutely.
I like that. Or, you know, you start to get, so we do everything blind. That said, right now we primarily work with just a handful of different oak species. But if the taste vision was what we wanted, we would absolutely have them pull in. And, you know, we have counterparts in Japan that obviously work with Mizunara or Mongolica oak. And we're constantly looking at that. Right now, though, we stick pretty much with American and French, and are still finding new stuff. And
so it sounds like when you're experimenting, you're really looking for answers to questions. You're asking questions first, and instead of just throwing it out there blindly, which I think is the difference between experimentation that gets worthwhile results and just, you know, the kind of stuff we see in craft beer right now, like, oh, we dry hopped our beer with Frosted Flakes and brownie batter, and maybe it turns out good, maybe it doesn't, you know. And so you're taking a very measured approach. So you're giving them, you're telling independent Stave, we'd like these kind of flavors, layers, et cetera, added on the Maker's Mark. They're making staves, bringing them back to you, and then you're tasting them blind.
And we experiment and taste blind. And then, so take RC6. That was a 2-year project where the goal was, it was inspired by our yeast strain, which gives a very Hefeweizen taste, right? A lot of fruits and clove, spice notes, which is hard to do with wood because those flavors typically come from fermentation. So we did 2 years of back and forth where some things just automatically, this isn't working, eliminate it. And, oh, this one's a little bit closer, if it could be brighter, or it could have more of this. And they go back, they tweak the cooking recipe, and then they come back and we go again. So it's just a constant. And my #1 job description from Rob Samuels as Director of Innovation is I'm not allowed to throw shit against the wall. That is actually in my job description. So you nailed it, Pat. Like, we always start with what the taste goal is with everything.
Yeah, good experimentation should be looking for answers.
It's very purposeful.
Not just not doing stuff and then asking the questions after.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really great. It's the most purposeful way to go about this.
This is really good, guys. I've had like 3 fingers of this.
Good. I'm going to finish mine too. Thanks for joining us tonight, guys. I don't know if there's anything else you want to add with the what people might need to be looking forward to with Maker's Mark coming up. Another wood finishing release in the fall. We're going to have Binny's releases throughout the next couple seasons. And, you know, stay glued to the Binny's page. Hopefully we'll be able to involve everyone who's interested at some point in creating one of these wonderful Maker's Mark.
Guys, it's wonderful to see you all.
You too.
Good to see you as well. And you can see Pat twice. I want everybody to notice right back here. Oh, there he is. I think that's him. There's Pat.
I'm wearing a fashionable hat, yes.
Well, he's wearing the official Whiskey Hotline tartan. Yes. And wait, we go the other way. There's Joe. Joe wasn't here, but there's Joe. My head is too big to move out of the way
Chris
of me.
Wheatley back there.
Yeah. There's Rob Weekly. That's one of our Whiskey Hotline honorary members who works closely with us on a lot of our barrel selections in one of the stores. And
Brett, we put you to work. You're putting like stamps on barrels and like barcodes.
Exactly. Yeah. See, I'm doing. These guys are just standing around looking for a photo opportunity. I've actually got something going on.
Yeah. We're no doubt making jokes about wood at the time, I
think. Easy to do.
Or bungs.
Very. Yeah, or bungs probably as well.
Bung holes.
All right. Well, thanks a lot, guys. Anybody else, if you got any questions or follow up on anything like this, you can always email us at spirits@binnys.com, and either Brett or Joe or I will get back to you. So hopefully we'll see you guys soon. Maybe if we still can't get together in person, we'll do another one of these when the summer one comes out.
Would love that.
All right.
Cheers,
thanks a lot,
guys.
everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Keep your eyes up.
Yeah.
Happy Friday.
All right.
Be well.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Bye.